Good day, I'm Pieter Rademeyer, I'm the Agronomy Manager for Pannar Seed, and I'm going to talk on maize pollination and fertilization. And let's start with part 1. Now, maize is a monoecious plant. It means that there's two types of flowers, a male flower and a female flower on the same plant. The one is the tassel and the other one is the cop. And due to the distance between those two flowers, there must be an abundant amount of pollen for pollination to take place. So the growing point is basically on soil surface on the 5-leaf stage. Microscopic ears also developed at that stage, and at the 5-leaf stage already the amount of rows around the cop is been determined. So if you have any stress during the 5-leaf stage, in the end you will see it in the yield. Right, let's start with background. Successful pollination, like I said, abundant, copious amount of pollen is needed. There must be synchronization between the pollen shedding and the silk appearance, and we aim all for higher yields, and you can do that by means of management practices, fertilization, radiation. There must be good weed control, and then the amount of sugars that comes from the plant due to the photosynthesis process. So let's start with the male part, and that's the tassel, and that's, we call it a VT stage, a vegetative tassel. And that's basically the last stage of the maize plant, vegetative stage. And the moment if you see the whole tassel, then the plant is in that VT stage. Bear in mind that plant population will determine the size of the tassel. The lower the density you plant, the bigger will the tassel be, and the higher population, the smaller it will be. Right, inside the tassel, if you look close to it, you will get basically flower packages. We call it a floret, and inside that floret is the anthers, and as that anthers get ripe, the filaments will push it to the outside and where the pollination take place. There are anything between 200 and 2,000 florets on a maize plant. So you can see the amount of anthers that's there and the amount of pollen inside. It's plentiful. Now, pollen for the maize plant is stored inside the anthers. And what happens, the anthers take off the moisture in the evening, and as it dries out the next day, then you will basically get that one end burst open and the pollen is released from that opening. Now, the drivers behind this is humidity, high temperature and wind speed. But luckily, not all the anthers will burst open on the same day. So that takes a couple of days to open all of that. And so you have a long period of pollination. Now, one anther can shed pollen for about 3 days. Then it's empty, and then the others will then follow afterwards. Now the composition, if you take the composition of pollen, it's close to 100% protein. And for the plant to produce that 100% protein, they need a lot of plant energy. So this plant actually can stress very easily. If you look at the graph and you look at the red line, you will see during the pollination stage, it's extremely sensitive for heat or drought spell, and you will see if you have a drought spell during the pollination, in the end you will see it in yield reduction. Alright, after pollen has been shed, it will be viable for basically 1 day. The median for pollen shed is anything between 5 and 7 days, and each maize plant can produce anything between 2 and 25 million pollen grains. So that gives you anything between 2,000 and 25,000 pollen grains for each and every kernel that you in the end will harvest. So the pollen is in abundance, and this process mainly takes place in the early mornings. Alright, then the factors that influence the pollination process. First of all, if you get persistent rain for days, synchronization between pollen shedding and the silks, drought during the flowering period, heat conditions. Bear in mind that pollen can become sterile at 38 degrees centigrade, and especially with low relative humidities. I want to sum up this section. I said during the 5-leaf stage already that the tassel and the copse is been determined in the plant, and the 5-leaf stage is very important for the first yield that's been in the end that you're going to harvest. The male flower is the tassel, and in the end you will see it on the top of the maize plant, and there's abundance amount of pollen inside the tassel. Environmental conditions like wind, temperature and humidity plays a major role in the success of pollen and fertilization, and you must have always good synchronization between pollen and the silks to have good fertilization in the end. That sums up this part, and I thank you.